In this anime, everyone thought that Mahiro, the hero of this story, was just an ordinary orphan. But his life changes completely when he ends up saving an incredibly powerful vampire. And completely unexpectedly, he ends up becoming his master. And as I said before, Mahiro lost his mother when he was very young. And as if the pain of loss wasn't enough, he was forced to listen to his relatives complaining because no one wanted to take care of him. After all, in addition to having lost his mother, he had already lost his father before. At the time, he was feeling consumed by loneliness until out of nowhere his uncle surprised him and offered to take care of him. His uncle placed his hand on his head, assuring him that everything would be fine. This left a deep impression on Mahiro, who now carries with him a great desire to help others. Now, in high school, he follows a practical life philosophy, doing what is logical and simple, taking the initiative without expecting others to do anything for him. However, this only makes him work too much, while others do nothing. One day, when Mahiro returned home, he found an injured stray cat. He didn't think twice and took the cat home, intending to take care of it until it was completely healthy. However, he ended up adopting the cat. He ended up naming this little black and sleepy cat Kuro. He did all this without knowing that there was something dark behind the cat's innocent appearance. The next day, while talking to his friends, they started talking about the rumors of vampires attacking near the train station. Rumors said that 10 people had already been sucked, but Mahiro, who didn't believe it, didn't pay much attention and continued on his way. However, to his surprise, when he got home, he found his TV on. Scared, he slowly entered his house and ended up finding an emo boy watching the TV in his house. In a panic, Mahiro asked who he was and how he got in, but the boy didn't answer. Then, Mahiro grabbed a broom and attacked him, but the intruder was too fast and easily dodged. And when he tried a second attack, Mahiro accidentally moved his curtain and let the sunlight enter his house. At that moment, the light revealed something shocking. The stranger had transformed into the black cat Kuro, and Mahiro was shocked by this. When he closed the curtains, the cat turned back into that human. Still not understanding what was happening, Mahiro asked this boy who he was. Then, a lazy emo replied saying that he was just a kind-hearted vampire. Mahiro then accused Kuro of being the vampire that was attacking people at the station, but the vampire just denied it. It was then that Kuro explained that as a vampire, he is bound to a human master, being able to drink only his blood and obeying only his orders. He says that he doesn't have a master, so he just lives peacefully and relaxing. The vampire then asks Mahiro not to call him by the name he nicknamed him, especially when he is in his vampire form. However, Mahiro is too stupid and does exactly that, calling him Kuro, which ends up forming a temporary contract with Kuro. Fortunately, this contract disappears if Kuro doesn't drink Mahiro's blood within 24 hours, and after learning this, Mahiro quickly expels the vampire from his home, determined not to have anything to do with him anymore. Have you always wanted to draw your favorite anime characters but think you don't have the talent? Here on our channel we have the perfect solution for you. We've formed an exclusive partnership to teach you all how to draw anime quickly and easily. Even if you think you don't have the talent for it, you will learn from Noah Williams, one of the greatest experts in the world of anime. Drawing anime has never been so simple, and it doesn't matter if you are a beginner or already have some experience. From the first class you will see the results. You will learn very quickly. The link will be in the video description, and only you can access and learn today. However, when Mahiro tried to enter his house, a force pulled him closer to Kuro. This happened because they were now bound to each other by the magical bond of the contract. So, even though he didn't want to get involved, Mahiro had to accept him back into his house. Later, while meeting with his friends, he tried to tell everyone that Kuro was a vampire, but no one believed him. During the conversation, a menacing shadow appeared in a mirror and suddenly, a vampire named Belkia appeared. Belkia attacked one of Mahiro's friends, who began to bleed. Everyone ran away while Belkia climbed a pole and challenged Kuro to a duel. Kuro wanted to avoid trouble, but Belkia didn't give him a choice. So, just as Mahiro tried to protect his friends, he was attacked, which forced Kuro to step in and save him. During the confrontation, Mahiro insisted that Kuro drink his blood to gain more strength. And even though he didn't want to drink a man's blood, Kuro had no choice but to get beat. He drinks Mahiro's blood, turning the temporary contract into a permanent bond. By doing so, the vampire gains an enormous amount of power, and now, with Mahiro as his master, he receives his orders and quickly defeats Belkia. However, when he was about to kill him, he ends up not doing so because of Mahiro's request. Before disappearing, Belkia revealed that he was acting under the orders of Tsubaki, a mysterious vampire that no one knows about. Tired, Mahiro and Kuro returned home, and when Mahiro woke up, he saw Kuro sleeping peacefully in his bed. After waking up, he ran straight to school, being very worried about his injured friend. But to his delight, he was completely fine. Furthermore, his friend claims that the police said that he was in a car accident. He says that there have been a lot of car accidents these days, in which the person's neck is bitten. Mahiro immediately feels that something is wrong. After all, none of his friends remember that they were attacked by a vampire. So, when he returned home, he asked Kuro if he knew anything about Belkia or Tsubaki. But Kuro revealed that he didn't know who they were. Suddenly, without a cloud in the sky, it started to rain, and Mahiro was immediately taken to a strange dimension. At that moment, a completely unlucky boy, dressed as if he were a manipulative Shinigami, appears and starts laughing at Mahiro. In the midst of this confusion, Tsubaki, the strange boy, grabs Mahiro's bag without him noticing and takes Belkia out of it. Belkia calls this boy master, and Mahiro panics panics, realizing that he is facing a very powerful enemy. Tsubaki wastes no time and throws Kuro aside, forcing her to transform into a human. He then calls Kuro his older brother, and when Mihiro asks if that is true, Kuro replies that he has never seen this Aizen cosplayer before. Tsubaki laughs sinisterly, but in this anime everyone laughs like that all the time. After finishing his laugh, he calls Kuro cruel for not recognizing him, and then Tsubaki starts telling us the story of this anime. Basically, there are 7 original vampires who can form contracts with humans and become vampires. All vampires are brothers based on sins. Kuro is the vampire of laziness, the older brother. However, Tsubaki claims to be the 8th true vampire, saying that he is the vampire of melancholy. However, he is very sad because no one recognizes him as part of the family. Mihiro becomes increasingly confused hearing all of this. Tsubaki then transforms into a fox and jumps on Mihiro's shoulder to tease him. Mihiro tries to stay focused and asks Tsubaki if he was the one who sent Belkia the day before. Tsubaki confirms this with a disturbing smile, saying that he loves killing people and vampires. Then, without warning, he attacks Kuro with a sword made of red flower petals. But Kuro manages to block it with his claws. Mihiro then asks Kuro to drink his blood so he can fight and defend them. But Kuro refuses, saying that he has muscle pain from using his power after being idle for so long. Tsubaki quickly takes advantage of Kuro's weakness, knocking him to the ground and stepping on him. After that, he grabs Mihiro and announces his intention to declare war on all vampires, and he's going to do it because he thinks it's fun. Mihiro realizes that Tsubaki is a completely crazy person and remembers one of his uncle's advices, who recommended that he name his feelings and face them. Mihiro then decides to try to be Tsubaki's psychologist using the hero's speech against him, but Tsubaki ends up finding this ridiculous and tries to kill him. He tells Mihiro to wait at least 13 episodes to use the script's power, and Mihiro is saddened that his main character power doesn't work. Tsubaki then tries to kill him, but Kuro intervenes and saves Mihiro. However, Kuro is still weak and Tsubaki would still be able to kill Mihiro. However, out of nowhere, Kuro and Mihiro mysteriously disappear. Soon after, Mihiro discovers that they were saved by another vampire. At that moment, 2 twins appear and say that their master wants to see him. Kuro tries to avoid the visit by transforming himself into a cat, but a spoiled rich boy sitting on a throne appears and says that Mihiro has no choice. They then get into the boy's limousine, who introduces himself as Misono, the master of the vampire of lust. Arriving at Misono's house, they meet Snow Lily, the vampire who initially appears as a butterfly perched on Misono's head. Misono says that first of all, he needs to teach Mihiro one thing. With that said, Snow sucks his blood and summons his scythe, showing all his power. Soon after, Misono completely changes his attitude, calling Mihiro incompetent for not knowing how to use Kuro properly. He says that Mihiro should become his servant, but Mihiro refuses. Then, Misono orders Snow to attack them. Mihiro and Kuro manage to escape the first attack. Now, being very irritated by Misono's arrogant behavior, Mihiro takes Kuro and decides to leave, declaring that he wants nothing to do with rich idiots. However, when he tries to leave the mansion, he realizes that he is completely lost, and as he tries to find the way out, he sees several children watching them through the windows. At that moment, Snow appears and explains that those children are his subclasses, literal vampires that were created by him to do his bidding. Misono arrives shortly after, very out of breath from having run all the way there. He explains that he wants more power so that he can protect those children, and asks Mihiro to submit to him. Mihiro refuses again, saying that he will not become his servant, but that he can help him as a friend. Misono easily accepts this, as long as Mihiro learns to use Kuro's power. After that, Mihiro returns home with his best friend, Sakuya. On the way, he feels a strange presence, but finds nothing. So, Sakuya jokes, asking if it is a vampire, and Mihiro disguises himself without being able to tell about Kuro. Mihiro decides to leave, and promises to call Sakuya if anything strange happens. The next day, Mihiro seeks out Misono to find out how to obtain a weapon, but Kuro explains that he needs to enter his mind to find it. Inside, Mihiro sees a pile of gifts, and he chooses the simplest one, following his life philosophy. This gift transforms into a magical broom, which soon becomes a tattoo on his wrist. He wonders if he can really fight with a broom. Mihiro then tries to summon his broom to help him fight, but it won't come out. Snow then tells Mihiro to imagine his goal, as this will help him summon the broom more easily. Mihiro immediately thinks of his friends, seeing them as his family, and tells Misono that one day he will introduce them to them too. A few days later, Mihiro and his friends start to worry about Sakuya, who hasn't been to school. Deciding to visit him, Mihiro grabs some snacks to take with him, and tells Kuro about how he and Sakuya have been best friends since elementary school. But suddenly, he realizes that his memory is failing him. He forgets Sakuya's address, and even begins to doubt if he has ever been to his house before. As Mihiro tries to figure out what is happening, Sakuya appears out of nowhere and scares him. Mihiro asks him about his absences from school, but Kuro is suspicious and keeps an eye on the boy. Sakuya explains that he was recently attacked, and that despite being saved, he was afraid to leave the house. Suddenly, they hear a scream in the distance. Sakuya then takes Mihiro by the hand and guides him through the narrow alleys until they reach a completely isolated space. And before Mihiro can ask what happened, he and Kuro are suddenly tied up with steel ropes, and some swords advance, almost hitting Kuro. On top of a building, Belkia appears appears and descends towards them. Sakuya loses his temper and yells at Mahiro, asking why he went into that dangerous area, despite having warned him several times that vampires were attacking that place. At that moment, Kuro realizes the truth. Sakuya is, in fact, a lackey of Tsubaki. Sakuya then taunts Mahiro, asking him to reflect on the past and try to remember which memories between them are real and which are false. Then he takes out knives and advances, saying that he wants Mahiro to find out the truth. Sakuya attacks Mahiro, but Kuro steps in front of him, taking the blows for him. Belkia wastes no time and stabs Kuro with his swords. Mahiro is shocked to discover that his best friend is a vampire. All this while Sakuya laments, saying that he too would like to be a human. At this point, Mahiro admits that he lied to Sakuya, pretending that Kuro was a normal cat. But he only did it because he knew that revealing the truth would put his friends in danger. But Sakuya seems to no longer care about anything. Mahiro then wants to solve the situation, asks for Kuro's help, but he refuses to drink his blood, saying that Mahiro does not have the determination to win this battle. Therefore, not even drinking a lot of blood would help them. Mahiro then begins to despair. But suddenly, the ropes that bind them are cut, and Miss Ono appears next to Snow. Snow begins to attack Belkia, while Miss Ono faces Sakuya to protect Mahiro, who he considers his first friend. Sakuya taunts Miss Ono, telling him that a rich boy could do nothing against him. At that moment, Belkia gets in Snow's way, and Miss Ono's special weapon kicks in, completely paralyzing Belkia. Snow takes the opportunity to attack and destroy Belkia's mind, which works quite well. After that, Miss Ono tries to talk to Sakuya, saying that it's a shame that they have to fight, since Mahiro wanted them to be friends. At that moment, Sakuya completely changes his attitude, pretending that he wants to be friends with them, which makes Miss Ono lower his guard and cancel Snow's chain. At that moment, Belkia, now being controlled by strings, attacks Snow and cuts his leg. Sakuya takes the opportunity to attack Miss Ono with his knives, causing some minor injuries, which end up being serious due to Miss Ono's body being so weak. Sakuya then puts a knife to Mahiro's neck, confessing that even when they were having fun together, he always wanted to kill him. He throws Mahiro to the ground, saying that now he will kill all of his friends. However, a ghostly apparition of a girl appears behind Sakuya and stops him, asking if he really wants to hurt others like he was hurt. At that moment, Kuro tells Mahiro that they need to run away since they are in no condition to fight, but Mahiro refuses. Determined, he summons his broom and attacks Sakuya with full force, causing wounds on Sakuya's body that won't stop bleeding. However, he soon realizes that he has lost control over his weapon, and as he hits Sakuya, Sakuya himself encourages him to kill. And because Mahiro's mind is in complete disarray, his broom ends up transforming into an unstable energy. He feels a little torn, and realizes that his weapon is forcing him to try to kill his friend, something he never wanted. Despite his resistance, he can't control himself and hits Sakuya again, which leads him to become increasingly conflicted. Sakuya is beaten so badly that he is even thrown against a fence. But he doesn't despair. He really wants to be killed by his best friend. He wants this to be the end of his painful double life. On the other hand, Mahiro's negative emotions, such as guilt and regret, begin to invade Kuro's mind. Suddenly, Kuro can't take it anymore and bites Mahiro's neck, sucking his blood. The chain connecting the two reappears, and Kuro releases his ability. From behind him, an intense darkness emerges and takes the form of a giant, terrifying cat. The giant cat vomits a dark liquid that covers the entire area, and Mahiro can only scream in confusion as he is dragged by that liquid. Sakuya tries to reach him and save him, extending his hand to him. He asks Mahiro to order his bump self to kill him so that everything can be resolved. In this tense moment, Sakuya quickly admits that he lied before because he just wanted to die at the hands of his best friend. However, things have gotten really complicated now, and everyone could die together. Before Mahiro can decide what to do, a bullet goes through Kuro's heart and his dark powers disappear. Just then, another bump being and his master arrive on the scene. The master orders his bump being to deal with everything and jumps down from above, kicking Kuro and shooting him until he reverts to his more harmless form. The bump being, who is wearing a brown paper bag on his head, runs towards Sakuya and shoots him. However, the puppeteer, Sakuya's ally, saves him at the last second. She orders Sakuya to retreat and he obeys. Before disappearing, Sakuya throws his bracelet to Mahiro, and Mahiro asks him if he really wanted to die, but Sakuya doesn't answer. Shortly after, a limousine arrives at the scene with Snow's subordinates. They rescue Miss Ono and take him to a hospital. Mahiro now feels guilty for Miss Ono getting hurt, but the master of the vamp and cowboy being appears and says that Miss Ono needs to take responsibility for letting his guard down during the fight. The cowboy introduces himself as a wandering antiques dealer, and his vampire partner is the famous Servamp of Envy. The vampire finds these new characters strange, especially since the retard talks to dolls and plays with his Servamp as if he were one, even though he is a stranger. Cowboy wraps his arms around Mahiro's ass and apologizes for shooting him in the heart, but he's a vampire, so everything will be fine. He comments that it would have been better if he could have dealt with Sakuya too. Cowboy then tells Mahiro that it's a good thing he realized early on that he doesn't have the determination to kill someone. So, in order to help Mahiro, he offers to break the contract between him and Kuro, saying that Mahiro is just a normal boy who should go back to having a normal life. Before leaving, he gives Mahiro his contact information and then leaves. The next day, while Mahiro is out shopping, he sees Tsubaki at a restaurant. He runs to sit next next to him and asks when Sakuya became his lackey. Tsubaki then begins to tell Sakuya's entire depressing story, saying that the boy was born into a terrible family. His parents forced his sister to commit suicide for the insurance money and forced him to lie to the police, saying that she fell out of the window while playing with him. They threatened to throw him out of the window if he didn't comply, and that's when Sakuya became a real liar, and he had to continue to do so because of his parents' pressure. 6 years later, he ended up being thrown out of the window just like his sister, but after falling and waiting for his death, Tsubaki appeared and saved him. He explains that a vampire's minions are born when a dying human drinks the blood of a vampire and become their subordinate. Tsubaki laughs at Mahiro for not realizing this. While buzzing Mahiro, he realizes the boy's intention to fight, but he tells Mahiro and Kuro that he is not in the mood for violence at the moment. Mahiro is paralyzed by fear and cannot even ask Tsubaki to return him to Sakuya. He feels like a complete failure for not realizing his friend's suffering, since Sakuya always acted as if everything was a joke when deep down he was just a sad boy. The next day, Mahiro goes to school, expecting to find Sakuya, but his friend is not there, and everyone reacts strangely when they hear his name. Everyone remembers his personality, but unfortunately, they do not remember his face. Mahiro realizes that Sakuya still wants to be remembered, but does not have the courage to share his existence. If he just wanted to disappear, no one would even remember his name. Now the cultural festival is starting, and Sakuya appears there wearing a mask, but no one seems to recognize him. Then, when one of his friends passes by, he sees a sign on their backs saying that they are waiting for him. He doesn't know what to do until Kuro flies towards him and knocks him down. Mahiro runs after Sakuya, who runs to the roof, telling Mahiro to stay away from him. Sakuya admits that he tried to kill him and his friends, but Mahiro calls him a liar. He says that Sakuya actually tried to save him, and says that Misono's injuries weren't serious either. Sakuya confesses that he only became friends with Mahiro that year, and that childhood memories were implanted in his mind. Mahiro says that it doesn't matter, because Sakuya is still his friend. Desperate, Sakuya jumps off the roof, but Mahiro jumps after him, grabs his collar and summons his flying broom. But he is a terrible pilot and they end up crashing straight to the ground. Now, in a completely isolated place, Mahiro assures Sakuya that, whether he's a vampire or not, he's still his friend. Sakuya feels a little relieved at this moment, and ends up laughing at the clumsy way Mahiro uses his powers. Soon after, Sakuya starts to cry, saying that he wishes he could live more happy moments like this. He says that when he was young, Tsubaki was the only person who comforted him, saying that it wasn't his fault for his sister's death. Upon hearing this, Mahiro promises that he will deal with Tsubaki, but Sakuya knows that this is impossible since Tsubaki is too strong. However, he still promises that he will put an end to Tsubaki's violence. Sakuya thanks Mahiro, but says that it's enough. He can't stay with him and the others anymore, and after saying this, he disappears, running as far as he can, and remembering how Mahiro was the first person who reached out to him in friendship. Tears fall down his face as he thanks Mahiro for being his friend and for allowing him to have a happy year in high school. Meanwhile, Mahiro, frustrated with his weakness, turns to Kuro, who was hiding behind a tree, and tells him that he wants to become stronger. Soon after this, Mahiro receives a letter that he finds difficult to open, so he gives it to Kuro, but Kuro, upon seeing the seal on the letter, decides to crush it immediately. The next day, Mahiro takes Kuro to school. There, Kuro instantly becomes the center of attention of the girls, and on the way home, the two come across a night festival and decide to enjoy it. They sit on a bridge and wait for the fireworks show to start, until out of nowhere, a man with an eye patch appears. He hands Mahiro a suitcase, saying that he doesn't know where the lost and found is, and asks him, a very kind boy, to take the suitcase there. As soon as Mahiro takes the suitcase, the man disappears in a strange way, and Mahiro, like a good idiot, doesn't even suspect it. He heads alone towards the lost and found, and on the way he meets a tall, blonde guy, carrying a coffin on his shoulder. The blonde guy explains that he got separated from his partner, so Mahiro tells him that his partner might be at the lost and found. The guy says that he doesn't know the way to that place, so Mahiro asks him to accompany him. During the journey, Mahiro asks about the coffin, and the blonde man answers that it is for vampires to sleep in, and despite finding the story absurd, Mahiro doesn't have time to process it because a gigantic explosion occurs behind them. People start screaming that a silver suitcase exploded, and Mahiro quickly realizes that the man with an eye patch tricked him. He remembers that he was told to put the suitcase down before the fireworks start, and time is almost up. Mahiro wonders what they are going to do with the suitcase, and he is initially hesitant to call Kuro, since revealing his identity as a vampire's master might not be safe. However, he decides to trust the blonde guy and calls Kuro. So, after feeding him some of his blood, Kuro grabs the suitcase and throws it as high as he can into the air. Mahiro panics, fearing that the suitcase will only explode when it hits the ground, and indeed that is what will happen. But before the worst can happen, the blonde guy intervenes, placing the suitcase inside his coffin and letting it explode inside. Mahiro and Kuro are in disbelief and ask the blonde guy who he is. He answers that his name is Tetsu, and that he is the heir to a hot spring inn. At that moment, we hear a voice from inside the coffin asking why a bomb was thrown inside. At that moment, a charred bat emerges from the coffin, and Kuro immediately recognizes it as Ryu, the vamp being of the pride. Tetsu explains that he named the bat Ryu, and that it recovers quickly with a little blood. Ryu begins to babble about meeting Tetsu, and comments that the world has been in chaos while Kuro was isolated. He warns that the explosion was probably Tsubaki's doing and that the situation is only getting worse. Later, while returning home, Mahiro is suddenly pulled inside by someone, leaving Kuro behind. Outside, Kuro realizes that something is wrong and tries to open the door but is met with a magical gun pointed at him. Another man, in a straitjacket, jumps on Kuro and the fight begins. Meanwhile, Mahiro is taken to a facility where a scientist named Tsuyuki greets him. Tsuyuki explains that they are at the headquarters of C3, which is an organization that seeks to maintain the balance between humans and vampires. He tries to convince Mahiro to ally with them in order to stop Tsubaki, who is dangerous to both humans and vampires. Mahiro, however, is reluctant, especially since one of Tsubaki's henchmen is his friend, Sakuya, and he has promised to save him. Tsuyuki states that dealing with Tsubaki is a serious matter and that Mahiro's personal feelings cannot interfere. However, Mahiro refuses to cooperate, so Tsuyuki gives him an ultimatum. He says that there are 54 doors in the room and only one of them leads to the exit. If Mahiro doesn't find the right one, he won't see Kuro again since Kuro is facing the most experienced vampire hunters in the organization. Desperate, Mahiro tries to find the right door but realizes that it's impossible to test them all. So, he summons his broom and creates a tornado, destroying the roof of the building and escaping. Even so, Tsuyuki warns him not to trust Kuro, but Mahiro responds by saying that he has seen the good side of vampires and that he believes in them as friends. Meanwhile, Kuro faces the vampire hunters. He tries to dodge their attacks but ends up getting hit. The hunters surround him and tell him that he should have come peacefully when they sent the letter and that now that he has refused it, it's too late. Kuro continues running while dodging gunfire and ends up reaching the riverbank. One of the hunters, the guy in the straitjacket, distracts Kuro by saying that his master is under their control, and the moment Kuro loses his concentration, he is suddenly trapped by black bars that appear around him. Just as the hunters are about to finish him off, Mahiro arrives on his broomstick and rescues him, taking him away. A few days later, Mahiro, Misono, and Tetsu call a meeting at Tetsu's hot spring inn. While Kuro and Snow enjoy a hot bath, Misono makes himself a fancy bed and Tetsu is busy working. Mahiro, on the other hand, is frustrated that no one seems to be taking the idea of a strategy meeting seriously. Later, Mahiro and Misono meet at the vending machine and start discussing everything they don't know about the Servamps and Tsubaki. Mahiro thinks that perhaps the master of the Servamp of Envy can help them since he seems to know a lot. However, Misono immediately rejects the idea, stating that they shouldn't trust him and that they can handle everything on their own. Soon after, Ryo arrives with new information. It turns out that there is a dangerous person roaming the city and he got this information from his lackeys. Mahiro and Kuro go out to investigate and learn from one of the river servants that their target is a man dressed in black with wings on his back. And unfortunately for Kuro, they spot the guy quickly. And despite Kuro's warnings about this man being dangerous, Mahiro decides to chase him. When they get close to the man, Mahiro notices that he is carrying a hedgehog in a cage. At that moment, the animal rights activist within Mahiro awakens and he decides to save poor Sonic. He runs after the man and when he turns the corner, he finds the man waiting for him. The man asks Mahiro if he is an angel or a demon, but Mahiro, of course, does not understand what he is talking about. At that moment, the mysterious man summons a magic piano and starts playing. The music is so intense that it makes Mahiro fall to his knees. He then declares that he is a demon and advances towards the boy. Kuro tries to intervene, but the man kicks him away and continues to hit him, sending him flying higher and higher. Mahiro, desperate, summons his broom and manages to reach the roof where the man is about to step on Kuro. But Mahiro stops the attack and offers some of his blood to Kuro so that he can regain his strength. Mahiro asks the man why he is attacking Kuro and asks him to release the hedgehog from the cage. Surprisingly, the man complies and as soon as he opens the cage, the hedgehog transforms into another Servamp. He introduces himself as Lao, the Servamp of Greed. He is a hyperactive guy who can't stop talking, and while he was talking non-stop about his life and his affairs, he ends up introducing his own master, the Lich, who is a pianist with delusions of being an angel. The Lich gets irritated by Lao's non-stop talking and banishes him from his sight, calling him a demon. However, Lao continues to flatter the Lich even after receiving several kicks from him. Mahiro, irritated by the strange behavior of the two, calms down and is at least happy to have found the other Servamp. But to his disappointment, Lao makes it clear that he is not his ally and states that Mahiro shouldn't need anyone's help because Kuro, as the oldest of all vampires, should be able to solve all this on his own. At this moment, Lao and Kuro begin to face each other and Mahiro realizes that there is an unresolved history between the two. Kuro probably stole Lao's girlfriend. He tries to get them to stop staring at each other by introducing himself to Lao and asking for his help, but Lao refuses. He looks at Mahiro and makes a sarcastic comment about how Kuro's master is a normal man and then leaves. Later, Mahiro finds out on TV that Lich is actually a brilliant pianist from Europe. Lao had said this, but Mahiro is deaf and this ends up surprising everyone. But Kuro takes the opportunity to warn Mahiro that it is better not to get involved with Lao because he has a reputation for killing his masters when he gets tired of them. Despite the warning, Mahiro decides to go to Lich's next concert. He watches the entrance to the hall, waiting for the chance to enter without being noticed. However, an enthusiastic fan sees Mahiro and decides to help him, offering him an extra ticket. On the way, Mahiro sees sees the man with the eye patch who had given him the explosive case. This makes him realize that Tsubaki is keeping an eye on Lich. Inside the hall, Lao is watching Lich's concert when suddenly the entire audience turns into Tsubaki's henchmen. As if he had already expected this, Lao faces them alone. When Mihiro finally manages to enter, he finds the place littered with bodies and is shocked by the level of destruction caused by Lao. The Lich, irritated by the noise, interrupts his performance and refuses to thank Lao for defeating the enemies. This ends in another confrontation between Master and Servamp, with the Lich kicking Lao, and Lao retaliating by throwing him against the wall. Mihiro tries to intervene, worried about the Lich, but Lao reassures him, saying that the Servampi's masters are tougher than they seem. Finally, Lao insists again that Mihiro let Kuro solve everything alone, but Mihiro disagrees, saying that no one can handle everything alone. Angered, Lao throws Mihiro away, but Kuro appears to cushion the fall and protect his master. Lao realizes the situation and decides to tell Mihiro the story of the 7 Servampis. It turns out that a long time ago, all the brothers lived peacefully, until one day they received a letter from an organization called C3. The message asked them to eliminate a specific person, and to decide what they would do. The vampires voted democratically. Greed, gluttony, and wrath voted against, while pride, envy, and lust voted in favor of accepting the quest. Due to the tie, the final decision was left to the eldest brother, the Servamp of Sloth. But when Lao is about to tell Kuro what he has chosen, the atmosphere becomes quite heavy and Kuro loses control, becoming overcome by rage and an intense thirst for blood. At that moment, Kuro releases his powers, while Lao continues to provoke him, insinuating that he is trying to hide something terrible from Mihiro. Angered, Kuro summons his sword and attacks, starting a brutal battle between the 2 Servampis on stage. Mihiro tries to intervene, summoning his broom and calling for Kuro. But when he sees Kuro's expression, he becomes quite shaken, as he seems to be feeling pure despair and pain. Meanwhile, the Lich, who until then was injured, suddenly recovers, and stops the fight. He manages to pin Lao to the ground. Soon after, he takes Mihiro's broom and uses it to staple Kuro to the wall. Then, with an authoritative tone, the Lich declares that everyone there is extremely destructive and that right now, their only goal should be to listen to his performance. The Lich calls out his magic piano and begins to play a sad melody. His music is so powerful that it forces all listeners to confront deep and painful memories. Mihiro cannot hold back his tears as he remembers the beautiful moments he had with his mother. Lao, still trapped, writhes on the floor, while Kuro remains paralyzed, with his pupils dilated, clearly reliving a trauma he was trying to forget. Unable to bear it any longer, Lao decides to attack the Lich, who was already prepared to fight back. But before they can face each other again, the door to the hall opens and the Lich's manager appears, accompanied by a whale-shaped mascot. In a comical move, the whale hits Lao and the Lich on the head, forcing them to stop. Lao does not hide his irritation with the manager and the whale, who, by the way, is his own servant. Meanwhile, Mihiro takes the opportunity to free Kuro, but realizes that the vampire is still out of his mind. Suddenly, he hears a sound coming from outside and sees one of Tsubaki's lackeys, who apparently survived, and she is begging for her life. However, Lao, without hesitation, prepares to eliminate her, but Mihiro stops him, holding his hand and arguing that there is no need to kill someone who is not even trying to fight. Reluctantly, Lao retreats, saying that he does not have the patience to worry about secondary characters. He then leaves the place, and Mihiro approaches the Lich's manager, who introduces himself as his guardian. They decide to spare Tsubaki's servant's life, taking her back to the inn. Kuro follows Mihiro in his cat form, still plunged into a disturbing darkness, not as great as Kurapika's. Meanwhile, Lao tries to ease his tension by watching random videos on the internet. Suddenly, Tsubaki appears behind him, which completely scares him. Tsubaki, with a sinister smile, draws his weapon and makes it clear that he is ready to act. Back at the inn, Mihiro faces criticism from Miss Ono for acting alone. He explains that he captured Tsubaki's servant, named Lilaki, but Miss Ono does not trust her. Despite this, Mihiro believes that keeping her alive may attract Tsubaki to them. He reminds Miss Ono that on previous occasions, Tsubaki seemed to protect his allies. Later, Mihiro tries to talk to Kuro, but he realizes that the vampire has been deeply shaken since Lao mentioned their past. He tries to ask about Kuro's decision in the Servamp's vote, but before he can get any information, Kuro begins to transform into something monstrous and frightening. Even though he is scared, Mihiro insists, asking Kuro to return to normal. Kuro slowly complies, returning to his cat form and silently following Mihiro back to the inn. The next day, Mihiro talks to Lilaki, who asks why he is so kind, considering that she is an enemy. Mihiro responds that there are no women in this anime so far, and if she doesn't stay by his side, it will seem like this anime is about gays. She understands this very well and agrees with his opinion. Then, Mihiro continues saying that he doesn't see Tsubaki as an absolute enemy. He, in fact, sees him as someone who just needs to be stopped. So, as a way of thanking him, Lilaki warns him about Higane, Tsubaki's right-hand man, who is extremely dangerous. Soon after, Mihiro receives a call from the Lich's manager, informing him that Lon has disappeared and that the Lich is getting weaker and weaker. Meanwhile, the Lich comes across Higane, who claims that Tsubaki wants revenge for what happened to his lackeys. Higane plays along during the fight, but his power is frightening. He wounds the Lich with red flames and claims that Lon is under Tsubaki's control. The Lich, even injured, promises not to lose, but Higane responds with a tornado of fire so intense that it can be seen from miles away. Mahiro, realizing the danger, decides to go there immediately. Mahiro tells Kuro to prepare for the fight, but first he asks for backup. Kuro reluctantly complies, since he has no choice. They arrive just as Higane is about to deliver a final blow to the Lich. At this point, Mahiro tries to assert himself, ordering Higane to stay away from his friend, but as soon as he realizes that he is facing Tsubaki's famous right-hand man, he decides to act cautiously. First, he tries to summon Kuro to fight, but something goes terribly wrong. Kuro is consumed by the darkness within him, completely losing connection with Mahiro. His form begins to dissolve into a dark liquid, and all of this ends up condensing into a strange black crystal ball. Mahiro, in shock, picks up the ball with trembling hands, trying to understand what is happening. He wonders if this is Kuro, and Higane, equally curious, approaches, but Mahiro tries to defend himself by summoning his broom. To his surprise, the broom is also absorbed by the crystal ball, leaving him completely defenseless. At that moment, the Lich, even injured, stands between Higane and Mahiro, saying that he has not yet been defeated. He uses the power of his magic boots to create a circular piano that surrounds Higane, and then tries to dominate him with his music. Higane, impressed by his skill, decides to take the fight more seriously. He counterattacks with his red flames, while the Lich responds and throws the piano keys in his direction. While the two battled, Mahiro just watched everything, being completely paralyzed. He realizes that he is nothing more than dead weight, a clown who only came to disrupt their fight. The Lich is still struggling, and he tries to encourage him, telling Mahiro that he should put aside his doubts and act with determination. The fight continues until the Lich, unfortunately, is defeated. Higane, satisfied, decides to take the Lich alive to Tsubaki, and Mahiro, desperate, tries to stop him, running towards Higane, begging him to let go of his friend. However, Higane only paralyzes him with a simple touch, leaving him helpless as he retreats. A short time later, Misono and Tetsu arrive at the scene, and are shocked to see Kuro transformed into that black ball. The vampires can sense Kuro's energy inside the ball, but no one knows how to help him. Mahiro, consumed by guilt, admits that he should have waited for reinforcements, but Misono reassures him, saying that there is still hope. He finds a cell phone left behind by Higane, which contains a keychain clearly belonging to Belkia. The phone soon rings, and it's Tsubaki who's on the line. Misono takes the opportunity to negotiate, demanding the release of Lao and Lich in exchange for the phone and the lackey who's with them. But Tsubaki just mocks him, and says that a cell phone isn't worth that much. But Misono insists, remembering that he also has one of his lackeys as a hostage. In response, Tsubaki merely laughs, saying that he won't hurt Lao and Lich, but that he might keep the two apart. After the call, the group decides to act quickly. Marrero, however, is removed from the mission, since without Kuro and his weapon, he is completely powerless and unable to fight. He is left alone with the black ball, reflecting on how he has always burdened Kuro. He cries and apologizes to his partner for not being helpful. Suddenly, Kuro responds from inside the ball, irritated by Marrero's complaints. He appears as a miniature version inside the sphere, and admits that he doesn't understand what is happening either. However, he seems to be enjoying the solitude, and says that in this form he doesn't have to deal with anyone annoying for now. Marrero calls Misono and Tetsu to show that Kuro is still there, but they can't see or hear him. Tetsu suggests opening the ball by force to free him, but Marrero disagrees, saying that he is Kuro's master, and therefore it is his responsibility to find another way. He tries to close the ball, but is unsuccessful. At that moment, Krantz, the Lich's manager, appears at the inn accompanied by the mascot whale. He is devastated to learn that the Lich and Lao have been captured by Tsubaki. Marrero apologizes, but Krantz decides to join the group. He shows his holy water pistol, explaining that it is very effective against vampires, and that he used to use it to calm Lao during outbursts. When Marrero asks where the weapon came from, Krantz says he bought it somewhere, and Marrero ends up finding out that the somewhere is actually Cervantes de Invage's master. Despite this, Marrero decides to try to ask for his help, but when he mentions this to Misono, the boy is hit by horrible memories of abandonment, and he states again that no one should trust this man. Even so, Snow manages to convince him that at the moment there is no other option. They then decide to go their separate ways. Marrero takes a train to go to the store where Cervantes de Invage's master is, and suddenly Tsubaki appears next to him in his fox form. Marrero is startled, and Tsubaki expresses his disappointment that he is not accompanied by his servant. Soon after, he starts to release a frightening black smoke. Marrero, thinking that an explosion is about to happen, jumps out of the moving train. I would have died just in this scene. However, when he falls off the platform, he realizes that it was just an illusion created by Tsubaki. Even though he is shaken, he understands that he needs to continue his journey, and without wasting any more time, he runs towards his final path. Upon arriving there, Marrero opens the door and is greeted by an absurd scene. A mad scientist is holding the melted head of a Barbie doll and turning it into juice. Marrero, completely shocked, stumbles and falls to the ground. The scientist notices his presence and, instead of explaining, asks, somewhat irritated, who Marrero is. The mad scientist pulls Marrero into the store, which is full of strange objects, many of them generic or bizarre looking. Confused, Marrero asks about another retarded person, who keeps laughing, who works there, and he discovers that the person he is looking for is not in the store at the moment. Now, trying to be polite, he introduces himself, but the scientist insists on getting every syllable of his name wrong. Still, he manages to remember that the boy is the master of the slaughter sloth vamp being, and to make sure he doesn't forget again, the scientist forces Marrero to sit on a chair and writes his name on his forehead. After that, he finally introduces himself as Johann, a vampire-obsessed researcher. Shortly after, the person Marrero wanted to ask for help shows up, and that's when he sees Johann, and he punches him in the stomach, furious that he murdered his Barbie doll's head. After that, he turns to Marrero, greets him in a friendly manner, and finally introduces himself as Miko. He takes the opportunity to thank Marrero for taking care of his younger brother, Miss Ono. Marrero is completely shocked to discover that Miss Ono is Miko's younger brother. Now, he perfectly understands Miss Ono's reactions to hearing about Miko, and before Marrero can ask anything else, Johann interrupts and says that he wants to meet the sloth vamp being. Marrero, still confused, shows that Kuro is still in his black ball form, and Johann is fascinated and drags Marrero to a mirror, which is actually a secret passage to a hidden laboratory. In the laboratory, Johann begins to measure Marrero's height, weight, and other physical conditions. Irritated by the delay, Marrero asks him to research Kuro instead of focusing on him. At that moment, Miko asks Marrero a direct question. He wants to know if Marrero is prepared to deal with Tsubaki when Kuro returns to normal. Marrero avoids the subject and asks why they use the term breaking for vampires. Mikuni explains that vampires are immortal, so theoretically they cannot be killed. However, the minions can be killed if Servank drinks their blood. Marrero remembers the day he met Kuro as a cat and gave him a bell. Miko explains that this bell is what connects Kuro to Marrero. He also clarifies that if this object is destroyed, Servank will be considered broken. Even so, Marrero insists on knowing how to bring Kuro back to normal. Johann admits that he has no idea, but then Marrero asks him about his obsession with vampires, and Johann begins a long speech explaining that he loves researching wars and he has heard of the countless battles that Kuro has won, and for him, without a shadow of a doubt, Kuro has the necessary power to defeat Tsubaki once and for all. But Marrero responds that he does not want Kuro's power, he just wants Kuro as a friend. Johann thinks this is silly, but proposes something. He offers Marrero a cup of tea, and as soon as he takes a sip, he faints. Johann laughs and reveals that the tea had a medicine that allows Marrero to enter Kuro's mind. He tells Marrero to resolve his issues directly with Kuro, and promises to observe the results of this experiment. Meanwhile, Misono hires a location expert to analyze photos taken from Hygen's cell phone. Through this, they discover that Tsubaki is staying at a 5-star hotel. Misono and the others decide to launch an attack, and in the middle of their plan, Sakuya intercepts Misono in an elevator. He reveals that Tsubaki's goal was never to harm the hostages, but to use Lao as bait to lure Ryo, the vamp of the Pride. Sakuya then summons a magical chainsaw and goes after Misono. The boy realizes that his plans were wrong from the start, and that now everything depends on improvisation. He knows that it is difficult to win in a direct fight, so he decides to provoke Sakuya. He tells him that Marrero still considers him and his friend trash, but Sakuya has no respect and works for a crazy trash like Tsubaki. His provocations work, and Sakuya screams, saying that no one understands Tsubaki's true motive. He claims that Tsubaki is looking for the key to something, but that he does not know exactly what it is. Tsubaki's true objective remains a mystery even to most of his subordinates. Misono realizes that Tsubaki is not looking for a simple war between vampires. Meanwhile, Ryo and Tetsu arrive at the place where Hygen and other Tsubaki henchmen have gathered to confront them. Ryo believes that the hostages are right behind them, and despite the greater number of opponents, he is confident that he and Tetsu can win. Meanwhile, Tsubaki has arrived at a forest as per the summons, and is not pleased when he is greeted by 5 men dressed as whales. The blue whale mascot has cursed Tsubaki, and demands that he return Lao and Lich to them, or else he will be beaten. Tsubaki mocks the grumpy voice that does not match the mascot's cuteness, and shows him the keys that lead to his servant and master's room. He then asks where his servant is, and the blue whale tells him that she is inside one of those mascots. He tries to take the keys from Tsubaki, but Tsubaki simply dodges without attacking and jumps into a tree, as attacking recklessly could accidentally hurt his servant as well. Suddenly, one of the other mascots uproots the entire tree he is in and tries to hit Tsubaki, and when he jumps away, the other whale mascots attack him as well. But Tsubaki has soaked his body, so he easily slips through all the attacks. He claims that since there is a chance that his servant is there, he cannot escape from this place. He tries to feel the blue whale, but the mascot's costume is so thick that he cannot tell if there are 2 people inside it. Tsubaki then laughs, saying that it's fun to play hide-and-seek with whales in a forest, and then uses his power to make it rain again even though the sky is clear. And he does all this while laughing like a madman. On the other side of the screen, Mahiru finds himself in Kuro's mind, which looks like a desert with red sand. He sees the creepy cat that gave him the gun, and asks for Kuro's location. The creepy cat tells him that Kuro doesn't want to see him, but Mahiru doesn't believe his words. He concentrates, hears the sound of the bell, and follows it as it walks in circles. He ends up falling face down on the ground, and soon discovers that the sound of the bell is actually coming from under the sand. Mahiru decides to get creative, and cuts through the sand to reveal an underwater staircase. He dives into the water and comes out on the other side, and just as a door opens, Mahiru is transported to an old memory belonging to Kuro. This is the memory of the meeting where the 7 servamps were gathered to discuss whether they should accept the mission to kill the person that the C3 asked them to. The vampires were divided into 2 factions, humans, and the person they were supposed to kill was in fact the genius who created the 7 servamps. While pride, envy, and lust believed that he was too powerful and dangerous to be left alive, gluttony, anger, and ambition believed that it was foolish to kill him since he had never done anything wrong. They asked Kuro to make a decision, and he declared that he would personally kill the person. Lion lost his temper at this and grabbed Kuro's collar, asking if he would have the courage to kill a human who represented his own father. However, Kuro told him not to use that word in front of him, as he was not proud of how vampires like him were created. Mahiru was shocked to see this, and followed Kuro on his hunt. He followed his memories as Kuro entered a traditional Japanese house and met his creator. Suddenly, black, thorny vines sprouted from the ground and blocked Mahiru from seeing or hearing anything else. He struggled to get rid of them, but when Kuro attacked his creator, the vines tightly covered Mahiru's eyes to the point where he began to bleed. Kuro told him that he did not want him to see the most shameful act of his existence, and the scene quickly changed to the after effects of the murder. While envy, lust, and pride are content with the end of things, gluttony and wrath believe there is no better way to end things and bring peace to the world. Everyone swears not to hold a grudge against Kuro, but Lion is different. He swears that he will never forgive Kuro and simply walks away from him. Mahiru sees all this and yells at Kuro to stop because now he is ready to accept him along with his sins. Suddenly, darkness covers everything, and when it dissipates, Mahiru finds himself in a strange place full of sealed blocks. The scary cat is not happy with the fact that Mahiru is advancing deep into Kuro's mind, but still he asks the boy to satisfy his curiosity and open one of his secrets contained in those blocks. He offers him strong weapons to break through those blocks, but Mahiru says he doesn't need them. He knows that Kuro is inside and that he only needs to knock to get to him. He knocks on the door and Kuro creates a door for him. Mahiru opens the door and enters the room, which is completely dark. There he hears Kuro's regret after killing his creator. He soon brightens up and finds Kuro wrapped up, still wondering if he did the right thing. Kuro wants someone to tell him that he wasn't wrong, and Mahiru yells at him saying that he was indeed wrong. At that moment, the space around them begins to crack. All this at the exact moment that Mahiru tells Kuro that if he still has doubts that he did the wrong thing, it means that in the end, he was wrong. Mahiru says that it takes courage to accept your mistakes and move on, and that they still need to do that. He headbutts Kuro, telling him not to waste his time here. Mahiru reaches out to him, telling him that he is not alone this time, and that now they will face their past and future together. With that, the white space around them dissolves, giving way to a completely green place. Kuro accepts Mahiru's words, and transforms into his cat form to be hugged by his master again. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the hotel, the Lich and Lao come to their senses. They are tied up and injured, and discover that they are in different rooms. Lao tells the Lich that even a talented pianist like him will die without having any value, and the Lich responds that he won't die, and calls Lao a dreamless idiot, while Lao continues yelling at him, saying that he is nothing special. The wall then opens, and suddenly the Lich walks through. Lao remains silent, and the Lich asks him if he has lost the ability to debate after coming face to face with him. He says that as an angel, his duty is to kill a demon like him. He begins to release the power of his magical boots, and Lao just laughs, saying that those boots make him look very gay. Annoyed, the Lich says that this entire anime is gay, and even Lao is the gayest of all. This angers him, causing him to free himself from his bonds, summoning his weapon to defeat the Lich, and the fight begins, making the entire building shake. Lao realizes that the Lich must be in a worse situation than him at the moment, so he decides to finish him off quickly. He advances towards the Lich, but his sword is kicked several times. But then, out of nowhere, the Lich starts bleeding, and he immediately backs away. Lao believes that he will give up, but the Lich does not give up. The vampire being is impressed, and decides to give up. He says that they are both different people, but they are still secondary characters in the flow of this world. The Lich disagrees with him, and says that the only minor character in this entire world is Lao, who is too afraid to dream about anything. He mocks him for being the vamp of greed when he doesn't strive for anything. The Lich runs towards Lao, but his words provoked Lao too much, and so he released all his power, enveloping them both in darkness, while telling him that he knows nothing about him. Suddenly, the Lich sees Lao's memories from a long time ago. He used to be the servant of an outgoing princess named Ophelia. Lao truly adored her, and every moment he spent with her was pure happiness. However, one day, Ophelia told him that her marriage had been decided with the enemy prince to ensure peace between the two kingdoms. Lao was devastated, and asked her to run away with him to obtain the freedom she so desired. But Ophelia told him that peace and prosperity for her kingdom was more important to her than her own freedom. Lao had no answer to this, and only watched as Ophelia married the prince. The peace brought by the marriage was short-lived, and soon a war began between the two kingdoms. The nobles of Ophelia's kingdom, thinking that she was now a spy, decided to kill her. Lao heard everything, and went to tell Ophelia about what had happened. He told her that this was her last night to escape, but she refused to do so. She declared that she now wanted peace for both kingdoms, and she was willing to pay the price for it. Lao could only cry, as he said that he would kill anyone who wanted to harm her, but Ophelia forbade him to do anything. The next day, she was taken to the public square to be executed, and even there, she asked the people of both countries to honor her sacrifice and fight for eternal peace. Lao could only watch as the executioner's blade fell upon her. He was devastated, and for many centuries after that, he remained in the form of a hedgehog and guarded the statue of Ophelia that the people had erected after peace was achieved thanks to her her sacrifice. One night while he was shedding tears for Ophelia, he was called to a meeting called by their older brother. It was at this meeting that Kuro decided that he would kill their creator. Lao was not ready to accept the peace that would come after killing him because the emotional wounds he received from Ophelia's sacrifice were still fresh. He was devastated when the Kuro refused to listen to his pleas and killed their creator anyway. Afterward, he returned to Ophelia's kingdom only to discover that a powerful enemy nation had destroyed the two kingdoms she had tried so desperately to protect. Her headless statue crumbled before his eyes and Lao was never the same again. He became convinced that all life is inherently worthless and danced in the rain holding a broken piece of Ophelia's statue. And that was the beginning of his villainous phase. The memory film ends and the Lich is unimpressed with what Lao wanted to show him. However, Lao is there with him, disguised as a yellow shapeshifter. He claps his hands and cries as he watches the film made from his own memories. The Lich then steps onto the stage to give him a truly unforgettable performance. He throws aside the curtains to reveal a piano and begins to play it. Lao refuses to listen because it is a sad song, but the Lich tells him that his music is not sad, but the person listening to it. Lao is shedding tears and finally realizes that this is the power of imagination and that he interprets things as he imagines them to be. Finally, he realizes that he cannot give up his desire to protect Ophelia until the end, which leaves him sad and afraid. Lao curses himself for having followed Ophelia's orders and wonders why he could not create a way where he and Ophelia could make a child and live together forever. He finally realizes that he still has things he wants to achieve at all costs, so he wants the Lich to survive this approval. And now he also wants to confront Kuro properly, asking him why he killed their creator. He remembers Ophelia and reaches out to her, breaking the dreamscape and freeing himself and the Lich, who have now become a beautiful team. Together, he breaks into a certain room, but Higgin only appears to take them back. The Lich tells Lao to get out of his way, as he wants to settle the score on his own. However, Lao says that this is impossible in the condition he is in. They start fighting alone, and Higgin finally loses his patience, deciding to start the fight himself, setting the room on fire. The Lich attacks Higgin, who easily dodges his kicks. Lao takes the chance to attack him from behind, but Higgin also dodges and slashes his face before setting him on fire. After putting out the fire, the Lich and Lao attack their enemy again, and Higgin decides to finish off the human first. But just as he is about to attack the Lich, he uses his special power and switches places with Lao. Higgin is surprised, and taking advantage of the situation, the Lich lands a strong kick on him, sending him against the wall. But this doesn't do much damage to the redhead, who gets up to fight. The Lich and Lao use their strategy of switching places to defend and attack at the same time, and the enemy decides to go all out against them. He takes off his gloves and suddenly attacks the Lich, scratching his face. His face didn't catch fire, which leaves the Lich a little surprised. But out of nowhere, his enemy licks the blood from his hands. He says that he is also a vampire. Suddenly, a huge red explosion shakes the building, and the Lich and Lao are thrown to the other side of the room. Higgin has started to age in reverse and is ready to defeat his enemies with all his power. On the other hand, Saku is tied with Misono and Snow. He throws knives at Misono and barely misses. During the fight, he discovers that the watch Snow was wearing around his neck is the item his master gave him. So, to destroy the clock and break the bond between them, Sakuya bites his finger and lets his blood take the form of a sword. He attacks Snow with it, who blocks the attack with his side. However, Sakuya reveals that he is using Tsubaki's sword at that moment, which has the ability to nullify the Cervantes' power. He cuts Snow's side and points the sword at Misono. But before he can hurt him, a gunshot deflects the sword's direction. It turns out that Miko came there to save her brother and tells him to take the second elevator and return to the surface to help his friends. Misono curses him but follows his advice, and Snow joins him in silence. On the 41st floor, Tetsu is fighting Tsubaki's minions, using his coffin as a shield. He activates his special ability and summons a horde of bats, which he sends towards the minions. He is pleased with his work, but the eye patch guy attacks him out of nowhere, distracting him and allowing Belkia to trap him in his mysterious locker. Belkia laughs as he uses his special ability and makes Ryo disappear. At the same time, Misono arrives at the scene and asks Belkia to tell him where he sent Ryo. He laughs and tells Misono to worry about himself. Misono then learns that Rijin has gone up to fight the Ambition duo. He tries to organize everything about the incident in his mind, but he has no idea how he can change the situation. Belkia attacks Tetsu, who blocks his attack using Ryo's pipe, but the rope user ties his hand and leg to bring him to his knees. Misono is more frustrated now, and is about to order a retreat when suddenly a shadow covers the room. Everyone looks out the window, completely perplexed, when they see Mihiro arriving there, riding a giant black lion. He enters the room, and the lion transforms into Kuro himself, who had actually been hiding his true form the whole time because he was too lazy. Mihiro's friends take cover behind him and tell him the situation, but he tells them that they don't need to worry anymore, and summons his broom. He uses his power to transform the broom into a spear and charges forward. The string user attacks him first with her puppets, but Mihiro moves faster than she can react and hits her in the back of the head, knocking her out instantly and leaving her mentally retarded. Belkia and the eye patch guy launch a combined attack next, and Kuro decides to stop them. He summons the effects of a dark energy and creates sharp spikes from them. Mihiro jumps right behind him and hits the spikes with his broom, impaling the enemies. In the room above them, Higgin has already defeated Lei Leon and the Lich and decides to go downstairs to face Mahiro. Leon is still in disbelief because he saw Kuro's true form before and asks if Mahiro helped him regain his confidence. He doesn't want to be left behind, so he attacks Higan, who kicks him in the stomach and crushes him. He tells Leon to lick his shoes because that way maybe he will let the Lich live. The Lich immediately orders Leon not to back down and tells Higan to lick his shoes. He immediately takes it back because he realizes it is very disgusting. But Higan has fun with him. He talks about how he got tired of killing without thinking, but since Tsubaki wants him to do it, the Lich draws 3 connected rectangles on his hand, telling him to stop using others as excuses for his mistakes. He presses the rectangle and suddenly Higan feels his entire body vibrate to the sound of a piano beating. He realizes that the Lich is using his blood to convert his body into an instrument and releases a red flame that covers the entire room. The Lich quickly summons his magic piano and asks Leon to help him. The servant realizes that he must do something great to match his ambitious and cold master, so he covers Higan in flames and puts him in a trance. He takes Higan to the theater inside his mind where he challenges him to a one-on-one duel. Higan rushes towards him and dodges the first strike of his sword, but suddenly it transforms into 1,000 spikes that stab him everywhere. Leon reminds him that he is a hedgehog after all, and as Higan falls to the ground, they return to the real world. Leon and the Lich fall to the ground, completely exhausted. Just then, Mahiro and the others arrive in the room to save them, but the Lich stands up and confidently says that an angel like him cannot be saved. After saying this, he completely passes out. Now Mahiro believes that they managed to rescue the Lich and Leon. Mahiro then asks where Lilac is, and Tetsu opens the coffin to reveal that she was hidden inside and that they managed to trick Tsubaki into thinking that Lilac was among the whale's mascots. With that, Mahiro tells Kuro to settle things with his brother and he approaches Leon to thank him. Kuro says that Leon was the only one who never forgave him, and that's why he was able to face his regrets. Leon feels ashamed and relieved to hear this and thanks Mahiro for making this possible. Everyone starts to get along, completely forgetting about the past when suddenly Lilac takes the badge, which is the item that the Lich gave to Leon. She tells Leon that he doesn't deserve to be so happy since he killed all of his friends and that she can avenge them by breaking it. Mahiro remembers what Miko told him about the Cervantes being broken if the item that their master gave them is destroyed. He then asks Lilac not to do anything rash, but she tells him that despite his kindness, she is still loyal to her friends and will destroy this necklace to avenge them. Suddenly, Tsubaki appears behind her. He says he is happy to see Lilac safe and asks her to hand over the necklace. He is quite surprised to learn that Leon and his master have defeated Higan and even Kuro is back in his original form. But this is exactly what he wanted. Tsubaki throws the name tag in his hand as he walks towards the window. The Lich wants to fight him, but Leon stops him because he was unable to defeat Tsubaki before and now they are at their limit. Suddenly, Tetsu asks him what happened to Ryo and Tsubaki shows him a mysterious cabinet identical to the one Belkia used to make him disappear. He reveals that Belkia sent Ryo to him and that while everyone was having fun, he ended up with Ryo in the forest. Mahiro asks what he means by that and Tsubaki replies that he wants to impress his teacher by cleaning up his mess. He walks towards Mahiro with red flowers falling from his sleeve before they take the form of an arm. Tsubaki says that he is the only way to kill a servant. He scatters the red flower petals and summons his sword while throwing Leon's badge into the air. He cuts the badge and Leon in the same motion. Leon explodes, releasing a high-pressure mist. Tsubaki summons another sword, but Kuro shoots it out of his hand and grabs it. They face off and Tsubaki asks Kuro to step aside and let him finish off Leon. Kuro says that he finally recognizes him as a vampire and his younger brother because no one other than their creator could have given birth to a monster like him. Tsubaki says that their creator was also his teacher whom Kuro killed and now he wants revenge on him. He disarms Kuro and points his sword at him, asking him to reveal what his teacher's last words were, but the answer is simple. He didn't say anything. Tsubaki yells at him, asking if his teacher didn't say anything or if he didn't hear anything. Meanwhile, the mist swirls violently around the room and the Lich discovers that Leon has transformed into a hedgehog. Mahiro tells Misono and Tetsu to quickly descend while he steps forward to fight alongside his servant. Before they fight, Kuro admits that he was wrong to kill his creator, but he cannot stop now and must stop Tsubaki's madness as well. He draws his sword and says that they should talk with words instead of violence. However, the sword cuts his hand and Tsubaki tells him that words have no meaning here. Suddenly, Kuro has distorted visions of his creator and Tsubaki fused into one, telling him to become like them. Tsubaki then laughs, saying that he will destroy this imperfect world and absorbs all the mist released from Leon's body. He uses the power he gained from the mist and rains red magical blades all over the city. While laughing like a madman, Kuro approaches him. Determined to resolve everything through conversation, Tsubaki points his swords at him, but he dodges them and touches his shoulder. Tsubaki stabs him with his magic swords, but Kuro won't let go. He wants to talk about the wrong things he did and the wrong things Tsubaki is doing now. Tsubaki is perplexed by his determination and asks him why the creator did not tell the 7 brothers about his existence even in his final moments. He attacks Kuro and cuts off his arm and is about to finish him off. When Mahiro arrives and blocks his sword, Tsubaki ejects one of the blades, piercing Kuro, and it slashes Mahiro's face. Kuro is enraged by this, and when Tsubaki tries to attack his master again, he transforms transforms into a gigantic black lion, destroying the building in the process. Tsubaki continues to attack Kuro with his red blades, but he only deflects them. Kuro then steps on him, and as Tsubaki laughs and asks if he also killed his creator this way, he begins to give in to his anger. Mihiro says that he should not kill Tsubaki, and their enemy sees a chance in this situation. He controls his sword and sends it towards Mihiro, but out of nowhere, Sakuya appears before him and is stabbed by the sword to protect his friend. He tells Mihiro that he couldn't hide his side until the end, and Tsubaki just laughs at him. This time Kuro wants to kill him for sure, but Mihiro stops him once again. He stands between Kuro and Tsubaki, and suddenly Tsubaki's body begins to resonate with him. A gap opens in his heart, and in response, Mihiro's broom transforms into a key. He sticks the key into Tsubaki's heart because that's the simplest and most logical thing to do. By doing so, he can access the forbidden memories, and this is how Mihiro sees Tsubaki's life story, from the death of his parents to his rebirth as a vampire, and even his doubts about being accepted by his older brothers. He respected and worshipped his creator, and was devastated when he killed him. That day he lost his mind, and saved everyone who was on the verge of death. Now Mihiro realizes the reason behind his actions, but Tsubaki sees him in his memories and attacks him. They snap out of their memories of that moment, but Kuro stops Tsubaki's attack from reaching Mihiro. Mihiro feeds Kuro his blood, giving him a power boost. They charge towards Tsubaki, dodging his red blades, and then, instead of attacking Tsubaki, Mihiro just hugs him. Tsubaki is unable to process this, and loses his reason to fight, followed by the disappearance of his red blades. Moments later, Mihiro joins his friends, while Tsubaki heals the injured Sakuya, using her power on the roof of a nearby building. He tells Sakuya to listen to his last request, which is to tell all his minions to forget about him, and live their own lives freely. He then gives a smile, saying that he has some personal matters to attend to. Soon after this, everyone returns to their normal lives, and Tetsu goes back to work at his inn. The Lich is recovering from his injuries. Miss Ono is having a meeting with Tsubaki's minions at the C3 prison, and Mihiro is back at school, living a simple life with his vampire friend.